Hi, friend. Welcome to Rainy Tales, a quiet place for gentle stories told beneath the sound of rain. Now, let's begin tonight's story. The rain began without warning, soft and hesitant, as if the sky were uncertain whether to cry or to sing. I sat by the window, the glass cool beneath my fingertips, watching the first drops gather and slide down like liquid threads of light. The scent of jasmine tea drifted through the small room, mingling with the faint fragrance of old paper and wooden shelves. Everything shimmered in amber, the glow of the desk lamp, the reflection of rain in the cup, even the still air that seemed to hum between breaths. It was one of those nights when silence felt full, when time no longer hurried, but lingered gently between sounds. The tapping of rain on the window pane came in soft, irregular rhythms, each note a whisper, each pause a breath. I let my mind drift with it, tracing invisible constellations on the fogged glass. Somewhere beyond the clouds, the stars were still there hidden, waiting, breathing with the world. The old record player in the corner had stopped spinning hours ago, yet I could still hear the echo of its final song fading into the rain. It was strange how memory worked, how a melody could return as clearly as the night it first played, how certain moments lived on long after everything else had blurred. Tonight felt like that, a quiet return not outside. The world was washed of edges. Streetlights bled into puddles, roofs glistened, and the branches of the willow outside my window swayed like a lullaby. Every droplet seemed to carry a flicker of something more than water, a pulse of light, a small, living glow. I thought at first it was a trick of tired eyes, but when I leaned closer, I saw it again, tiny sparks falling with the rain, vanishing upon touch like faint starlight, dissolving into the ground. It made me smile, not because it was magical, but because it reminded me of childhood, the nights when I would lie on the balcony, counting shooting stars until sleep came. My grandmother used to say that stars fell to remind lonely hearts they were still being watched over. I never knew if she believed it or just said it to make me smile. The clock ticked softly behind me. Midnight, though it felt timeless. I wrapped the blanket tighter around my shoulders and lifted the cup of tea. The steam rose slowly, painting the air with warmth. Somewhere deep inside, a small ache stirred something between longing and peace. I didn't want the rain to stop. For a moment, I closed my eyes and simply listened. The world outside my window had become an orchestra of whispers, the patter of drops, the sigh of wind through trees, the faint hum of distant thunder rolling across the city's edges. Everything was connected, tender, alive. Then came a single drop against the glass, brighter than the rest. It burst like a spark and left behind a tiny trail of silver light. I leaned closer, almost holding my breath, and for a heartbeat, I could have sworn the sky was crying stars instead of rain. The thought made me laugh quietly. Perhaps the world was simply tired, like all of us, and it chose tonight to dream differently, to let go of what it carried. I thought of how many times I had done the same sitting by this window, waiting for something unnamed. Sometimes it was a letter that never came. Sometimes it was forgiveness, or courage, or just the right words to say to someone long gone. The rain had always been patient with me, listening without asking, washing away what I couldn't. Tonight, as the silver drops continued to fall, I whispered a small thank you to the rain, to the stars pretending to be rain, to the quiet that held me like a gentle hand. Outside, the light flickered again, tiny, weightless, fleeting. And I thought, maybe this was what grace looked like. Stars falling not to be seen, but to remind us that beauty often happens unnoticed. In the stillness between heartbeats, the night deepened, and with it came the soft hum of contentment. Somewhere beyond the glass, beyond the sky, something was healing. And though I couldn't name it, I felt it within me too, like the faint warmth of a smile you give yourself in the dark. When I finally set the cup down, the rain had grown steady and sure. I drew the curtains slightly, letting the glow from the street lamps spill across the floor. The room felt smaller, safer, like the world had folded itself into a single breath dot in that breath. I stayed, listening, breathing, letting the night whisper what words could not. And in that stillness, it began the story of the night when stars fell with the rain. The rain deepened through the night, a gentle insistence that blurred the edges of the world. I sat still, letting the room breathe around me, the glow of the lamp swaying slightly with the draft, the faint creak of the old wooden desk, the rhythmic sigh of water running down the glass. There was comfort in its repetition, in the way nothing asked to be understood. The cup beside me had gone lukewarm, but the scent of jasmine lingered, soft and steady, like a memory that refuses to fade. The window had become my second heart. Each drop landed like a pulse, irregular, tender, alive. I could almost feel it beating with me. When I leaned closer, I noticed how the rain traced slow trails across the pane, how the light bent and shimmered within them, how every reflection carried something of my own face. The lamp's amber halo touched the surface gently, turning every drop into a tiny lantern dot behind me. The shelves were lined with small relics of quiet living, folded paper cranes, old postcards, smooth stones from the riverbank. Each had its place, its story, its silence. I had collected them over the years, like someone trying to hold on to the sound of laughter. Sometimes, in nights like this, I'd run my fingers across them, one by one, and remember where each had come from. The touch always felt like prayer. Outside, the street shimmered. The rain had polished the world to a mirror. Lanterns along the sidewalk cast pools of gold that rippled each time a drop touched them. The air smelled of earth and rain and faint smoke from distant chimneys. Somewhere, a window opened, and I caught the low hum of a lullaby. A mother's voice, perhaps, or a recording left to soothe an empty room. I thought about how fragile comfort could be, and how simple it was to build. A lamp, a teacup, a song half heard. Maybe we didn't need to chase joy through noise and miles. Maybe we just needed to let it find us, softly, in the spaces between. There was a photograph pinned above my desk, one I'd almost forgotten. 2 cups of tea, side by side on a train station bench, steam curling upward into the morning mist. It had been years since that day, and yet every time the rain came, I thought of it. The promise we made then, to write, to meet again someday, under weather like this, had faded like ink in sunlight. But the feeling remained, faint and warm, tucked beneath all the days that came after. I reached for the drawer, hesitated, and then opened it. Inside lay a folded piece of paper, edges soft from age, the envelope slightly yellowed. My own handwriting, uneven, hesitant, curved across it. I had written it one winter long ago and never sent it. A letter that had waited through seasons of silence, tucked away like a secret too tender to lose, too fragile to face. For a long time, I just held it. The rain pressed against the window, asking nothing, promising nothing. There are moments when the world pauses, when even the ticking clock seems to breathe with you. This was one of them. I could feel the quiet urging me, not to move, not to decide, only to be here, to listen to what the night wanted to tell me. When I finally lifted the letter toward the lamplight, the ink caught the glow. The words were faded but still legible. A confession written not for an answer, but for release. I remembered every line as though I had just written it, how the words trembled with hope, how I had stopped halfway through, unsure whether to seal it or start again. I smiled, a little sad, a little grateful. There was something healing in unfinished things, in knowing that even what we couldn't complete still had its place in the world. I placed the letter beside the teacup. The paper looked almost alive in the golden light, edges curling slightly with the warmth. Outside, the rain softened. Each droplet seemed slower now, heavier with reflection. The window pane had begun to mist again, and I drew a small circle in the fog with my fingertip. Within it, I could see the lamplight trembling, and for a brief moment, the faint shimmer of what looked like starlight beyond the rain. Maybe it was just the way light played with the water, or maybe, just for tonight, the sky had decided to fall closer, to be near enough to touch. I didn't need to know which. I just sat there, breathing, the paper open beside me, the scent of jasmine rising anew, as though the night itself had exhaled. The air felt warmer, the silence kinder, and somewhere, far beyond what I could see, I sensed that something in the world, maybe the stars, maybe just the heart, had begun to listen back. The letter lay on the desk like a heartbeat I had once forgotten. Its paper, thin and trembling at the edges, caught the glow of the lamp as though remembering sunlight. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I sat for a while, tracing the creases with my fingertips, feeling the soft pulse of all the words that had waited inside for years. Outside, the rain kept whispering. The rhythm had changed slower, more thoughtful, as if the sky itself was listening. Every droplet that touched the glass seemed to echo some quiet confession, a sound only the heart could understand. I took a breath, one that trembled just slightly, and unfolded the letter. The handwriting stared back at me, uneven and small, as if written by someone learning to speak again after silence. I don't know how to say this without sounding foolish. The first line began, "But every time it rains, I think of you." Not because of what we were, but because of how the world felt softer when you were near. I stopped reading for a moment. My throat tightened, though I wasn't sure why. The voice in the letter was my own, but younger, gentler, someone who still believed every small kindness could change the shape of the world. I continued. I kept meaning to send this, but every time I tried, something held me back. Maybe fear, maybe pride, or maybe it's just that I liked the idea of you waiting on the other side of a letter more than I liked the thought of you reading it. A small laugh escaped me. It sounded strange in the quiet room, a sound like rain tapping on porcelain. How long had it been since I'd written these words? A decade? 2? I remembered the night clearly now. The same chair, the same lamp, though its shade was new. The tea had been chamomile then, not jasmine. I had been younger, full of words I never spoke aloud. The letter continued, fragile as breath. I hope you still walk by the river when it rains. I still remember how you said the air smelled different there, like the world was being rewritten. If you ever see the stars reflected in the puddles, know that I'm somewhere seeing them too. I pressed my lips together, holding back the ache that rose from somewhere deep inside. I hadn't thought of that evening in years. The two of us sitting by the riverbank, our shoes soaked, laughing about how the stars looked like they were swimming. The memory returned so clearly, it felt almost tangible, as though I could reach out and touch the wet stones beneath our feet again. I read the final lines. If this letter never reaches you, I hope the rain carries my words instead. Maybe you'll feel them, somehow on your skin, in your breath, in the quiet between storms. I folded the paper gently and let it rest on my lap. For a long time, I said nothing. There was nothing to say. The rain outside had softened into a mist, and the city's hum had dimmed, until all that remained was the sound of the world breathing. I looked up at the window, at the faint reflection of myself among the streaks of water. And for the first time, I noticed something new. The light outside had changed. The drops no longer fell like water. They shimmered faintly, each one breaking apart into a dust of soft silver before disappearing dot. It was as if the stars themselves had come closer. I stood, walked to the window, and opened it just a little. The air slipped in cool, fragrant, alive with the scent of wet leaves and rainlight. A single drop landed on my wrist, and for a moment it glowed before fading into warmth. I exhaled slowly, not out of disbelief, but wonder. Perhaps the universe had its own way of answering letters. Not with words, but with small miracles hidden in plain sight. I whispered into the night, not expecting a reply. If you're still out there, somewhere by the river, it's raining stars tonight. The sound of my voice vanished into the soft storm. But in the distance, I thought I heard an echo, a faint laugh, familiar, drifting like a thread of memory carried by the wind. Maybe it was just the city sighing. Or maybe it was something more. The lamp flickered, and the teacup gleamed in gold. The letter still lay open, a bridge between then and now. And I realized that even if the rain stopped, its rhythm would stay inside me, like a pulse, like forgiveness. I leaned my head against the window frame and closed my eyes. The world was shimmering now, not in brilliance, but in kindness. Sometimes, I thought, the stars don't fall to be wished upon. Sometimes they fall so we remember how to listen. The street below had turned to liquid amber, every puddle glowing with borrowed light. From my window, the world looked like it was breathing, each raindrop a slow inhale, each reflection a quiet exhale. The lanterns that lined the narrow street swayed with the wind, their halos stretching and breaking on the wet stones. It was late enough that most of the city slept, yet everything felt awake in its own hush. I wrapped my shawl tighter and moved closer to the window. The rain had changed, again less steady now, more like a dance. Drops fell softly at first, then scattered sideways as the wind curved around the corners of the buildings. Each one caught the light in a strange, beautiful way, as if tiny stars had dissolved and learned to fall. For a moment, I imagined walking down there, umbrella in hand, stepping through the puddles that mirrored the sky. I could almost feel it, the cool breath of mist against my skin, the hum of wet air filling my lungs. The thought made me smile. It had been so long since I had gone out in the rain, without rushing, without fear of getting wet, without needing to be anywhere. I reached for the umbrella by the door. It was old, its handle smooth from years of use. The rain met me the moment I stepped outside, soft, familiar, and forgiving. The air smelled of soaked leaves, rust, and something sweet, like night-blooming jasmine from the neighbor's garden. The first few steps felt strange, but then my body remembered. I walked slowly along the cobblestone street, letting my shoes splash where they wanted. The world had become a blur of reflections. Street lamps bent across puddles. Balconies dripped light. The glassy windows of the bakery glowed faintly, even though it was long closed. The rain was light enough now to hear the low hum of distant cars, the faint song of water running into drains. Everywhere I looked, the rain and light played together, one never existing without the other. I wondered if it was always like this, and we simply forgot to notice. Maybe beauty was never about seeing more, but about slowing down enough to see what had been there all along. As I turned a corner, I saw something that made me pause. Near the end of the street, a small pool had formed in the uneven stones. But it wasn't like the others. It shimmered with something brighter, tiny specks of light swirling beneath the surface, flickering like distant constellations. I knelt beside it, careful not to disturb the water, and watched. The stars in the puddle, if they were stars at all, moved with rhythm, pulsing gently as though breathing with the rain. Each one seemed alive for a moment before fading and being replaced by another. I leaned closer, and for an instant, I thought I saw the reflection of the sky above, but it wasn't the same sky. This one glowed deeper, with slow-moving rivers of light flowing between unseen clouds. I blinked, and the vision softened. The puddle was just a puddle again, rippling softly beneath the drizzle. but something had changed inside me. A quiet reminder that magic didn't need to last to be real. A faint sound broke through the quiet, the soft creak of a bicycle passing, its wheels slicing through the shallow water. The rider wore a long dark coat and a hat pulled low against the rain. He didn't look up as he passed, but the lantern light brushed his face for a brief second, and I caught a glimpse of something familiar. It couldn't be. And yet, for that moment, the world folded in on itself, and time felt thin. I almost called out, but my voice caught in the air, too heavy with hesitation. The man disappeared around the corner, his reflection scattering into 100 pieces of light. I stayed there a while longer, kneeling beside the glowing puddle, unsure whether I'd seen a stranger or a ghost of memory. Either way, the moment felt like a reply, a soft echo from the letter I'd opened hours ago. When I finally stood, the rain had begun to fall harder again. The umbrella bloomed above me, catching tiny sparks of starlight as I walked. Each droplet that landed shimmered before vanishing into fabric. The city around me blurred light, color, shadow, scent all melting into something quieter, gentler, like a dream on the edge of waking. And as I walked, I whispered to no one in particular. Maybe tonight isn't about seeing what's real. Maybe it's about remembering what still feels alive. The rain answered in its own language, a hush, a tap, a heartbeat, and I followed its rhythm into the night. By the time I reached the end of the street, the rain had become something else entirely. It no longer fell in drops, but in ribbons of faint silver, like threads drawn from the fabric of the night itself. The sky above seemed to breathe light. Every cloud pulsed softly, and for one fragile moment, the whole world shimmered as though it had forgotten how to be dark. I stopped beneath a willow tree, whose branches bowed low, heavy with rain and time. The leaves trembled, scattering droplets that sparkled before they reached the ground. I tilted my umbrella upward and watched as the sky wept light, tiny sparks, dissolving before my eyes, too soft to be lightning, too alive to be mere rain. It was beautiful in a way that hurt. The stars, it seemed, had come undone. They drifted downward like whispers, their glow fading the moment they touched the earth. I stood there, not moving, afraid that any breath might break the spell. The air tasted electric, metallic, and sweet, as if the universe itself had cracked open and spilled something sacred into the storm. I had seen meteor showers before, on mountaintops and beaches and forgotten rooftops. But this was different. This wasn't the sky showing off. It was the sky remembering how to feel. The light didn't burn. It sighed. It lingered, soft and patient, as though searching for something or someone to land upon. A drop of light fell on my sleeve. It didn't soak, it glowed. For a few seconds, a tiny constellation shimmered there, mapping itself against the fabric. I thought I saw shapes and arc, a curve, maybe even letters, but before I could trace them, the glow faded. The puddles at my feet reflected everything twice, once as rain, once as stars. I couldn't tell which version was truer, and maybe that was the point. I remembered something my grandmother used to say when storms frightened me as a child. Rain doesn't fall to break things, dear. It falls to make room for the light that comes after. I hadn't thought about her in years. But tonight, with the sky shedding its stars like tears, I felt her beside me, steady, gentle, unafraid. The wind shifted, carrying with it the smell of the river, the same scent that had haunted the letter. Wet stone, earth, and the faint trace of something blooming. I turned toward it without thinking. The path sloped downward, leading to the water's edge. The closer I came, the brighter the night became. The river, dark and wide, shimmered with the reflection of countless falling lights. It looked alive, rippling with slow, golden veins. Each drop that met its surface turned into a ripple of soft radiance before dissolving into the current. I crouched by the bank and dipped my fingers into the water. It was cold, sharp, real. The light gathered around my hand like fireflies, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. I smiled without meaning to. Maybe this was how the universe forgave us, not through words, but through moments where everything simply existed without asking why. The rain grew lighter still, until it was almost invisible. Only the glow remained faint and trembling, like the last notes of a song. Above me, the clouds parted slightly, revealing patches of deep indigo sky. The stars that hadn't fallen looked dimmer now, humbled by what their fallen brothers had become. I thought about all the things we hold on to, letters unsent, words unspoken, hopes deferred. Maybe they were never meant to stay locked inside us. Maybe, like these stars, they had to fall to dissolve, to become something softer than regret. The willow branches brushed my shoulder, as if urging me to keep walking. So I did. The river followed beside me, carrying its small pieces of light downstream. I imagined them drifting far, reaching someone else's window, another sleepless heart waiting for something unnamed. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone. The night was full, and it was enough. The sky continued to weep light, each drop falling slower, gentler, until the rain became only a whisper. And in that whisper, I felt it, the quiet truth I'd been chasing for years. That beauty doesn't need to last to matter. That love, once felt, never truly fades. It just changes shape, the way stars become rain, and rain becomes light. I closed my eyes and let a single droplet fall on my cheek. It was warm this time, not cold. Maybe the sky wasn't crying after all. Maybe it was finally learning how to let go. The rain had slowed to a hush, more a feeling than a sound now. A faint shimmer in the air, a breath upon the skin. I followed the river's curve out of the sleeping city, the cobblestones giving way to the soft earth of the path that ran beside the water. The umbrella hung loosely in my hand. The world no longer needed shielding. Everything glowed faintly, as though touched by a memory of light. Mist rose from the surface of the river, curling around my feet in ghostly ribbons. Each step stirred the reflection of the falling stars, breaking them into silver ripples that vanished behind me. The night smelled of moss and rain-soaked wood, the kind of scent that holds both beginning and ending at once. The willow trees along the bank leaned close, whispering secrets into the dark. Their leaves brushed against my shoulders, as if guiding me somewhere I had promised to go long ago. The letter's words echoed faintly in my mind. If you ever see the stars reflected in the puddles, know that I'm somewhere seeing them too. Maybe this was that place. Maybe this was that moment. I walked until the city lights faded behind me, replaced by the soft glimmer of the river's quiet pulse. The only sounds were my footsteps and the distant rhythm of water against stone. It was strange how silence could feel so alive, not empty, but full of presence, as though the world itself was listening. The memory came back to me slowly, carried on the scent of rain. Years ago, on another stormy night, we had walked this same path. The water had been higher then, the current stronger. You had stopped where the river curved toward the sea, and you said something I'd never forgotten. Every river eventually learns it doesn't have to rush. It just needs to arrive. I hadn't understood it then. I was young, impatient, always chasing meaning. But tonight, the words settled somewhere deep inside, like the final note of a song finding its echo. The rain began again, not heavy, just a fine drizzle, soft as breath. It gathered on my lashes, turning the world into 1,000 small halos. I didn't bother with the umbrella. Instead, I tilted my face upward and let the sky touch me. The droplets felt warm, as if the stars themselves were brushing my skin goodbye. Dot at the bend of the river stood an old wooden bench, half hidden beneath a canopy of leaves. It looked smaller than I remembered, but the feeling it carried hadn't changed. I sat down, the wood damp but welcoming, and listened to the water whispering below. From here, the horizon was a sheet of moving silver. The rain light shimmered on the surface like living lace. It felt like standing at the edge of two worlds, one waking, one dreaming, with no need to choose between them. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rang. Not loud, not insistent, just a gentle chime carried by the wind. I couldn't tell where it came from, but it made me smile. Bells have always belonged to moments of crossing, weddings, farewells, dawns. Maybe this was one too, though I couldn't yet name what was ending or beginning. I thought again of the man on the bicycle, his coat dark against the lantern glow, the curve of his shoulders familiar in a way that hurt. Maybe it was only coincidence, or maybe some memories walk the same roads we do, waiting for us to meet them halfway. The rain shimmered brighter for a moment, as if agreeing. I closed my eyes. In the darkness behind my lids, I could see it all. The cafe by the station, the 2 cups of tea, the laughter that had carried through the storm, the feeling of warmth beside me, the scent of wet wool and mint, the promise of seeing each other again when the rain returned. When I opened my eyes, the river looked different. The stars that had fallen were gathering on its surface, slowly drifting toward the sea. They didn't vanish this time. They glowed from beneath, soft and steady, like lanterns released by unseen hands. I imagined each one carrying something I'd left behind, the letter, the regret, the waiting. I whispered into the night, "Take them with you." The river shimmered in reply, a soft ripple reaching the shore. And then, as if to honor the request, a breeze rose, gentle, cleansing, carrying the scent of faraway salt. I leaned back against the bench, my hair damp, my heart lighter than it had been in years. Somewhere above, the clouds were parting, and I could see the faintest trace of the moon returning. Maybe I had finally arrived too, not to any place I could name, but to a quiet within myself. The rain was no longer falling now. It was only drifting, weightless, forgiving, free. When I opened my eyes again, the rain had softened into a haze of silver mist. The path beside the river glowed faintly, as though dusted with starlight. My umbrella, still folded in my hand, caught the reflection of the sky-thin ribbons of light tracing its surface. For a while, I simply sat there, listening to the hush. The river spoke in small, circular sounds, and somewhere above, an owl called softly before disappearing into the trees. I stood slowly and began to walk again, following the faint shimmer of the water downstream. The air felt lighter now, washed clean. I passed under the low arch of an old stone bridge where ivy clung to the damp walls, and the echo of my footsteps followed me like a second heartbeat. Beyond it, the path widened into a clearing that opened toward the far edge of the riverbank. That was when I saw it. A figure standing beneath a clear umbrella, its canopy catching the faint light of the falling stars. For a moment, I thought it was another passerby, but something about the stillness, the way they stood facing the water, the slight tilt of their heads stirred a memory so deep that I stopped breathing. The person turned slightly, and the light brushed across their face. Time folded. The years between us seemed to dissolve with the mist dot. It was you. Or maybe the part of you I had carried all this time. I didn't move closer right away. Instead, I watched the way the light gathered around her umbrella, scattering like constellations caught in motion. You looked the same and different, all at once familiar enough to break something open in me, distant enough to make me wonder if I was dreaming. The sky behind you shimmered faintly, and in that soft glow, I could see the outline of your coat, dark and wet at the edges. You lifted your gaze toward the river, then turned to me. No words were needed. There was recognition in your eyes, tired, tender, and impossibly calm. I took a step forward. The ground beneath me was slick, and each step felt like crossing a border made of time. When I finally stopped a few feet away, the umbrella between us caught the faint reflection of both our faces, blurred but together. "You came," I whispered. You smiled, not with your lips, but with your eyes. You waited. We stood there, two figures beneath the last breath of rain, neither of us asking how or why. The river carried its light past our feet, the stars drifting onward, dissolving one by one. I felt the weight of all the years between us, not heavy, not sharp, just real. Like a long exhale. "I found your letter," I said softly. My voice shook a little. "I know," you replied. I heard it. I wanted to ask how words written years ago could travel through paper and silence and reach this night, but I didn't. Some things didn't need explaining. Some answers were meant to stay beautiful by being incomplete. The rain began again, only a mist light enough to breathe. You raised your umbrella slightly, and without thinking, I stepped beneath it. The space between us was small, filled with the sound of rain on clear plastic, the rhythm of two heartbeats sinking to the night. For a while, we said nothing. The air around us shimmered with tiny sparks raindrops that seemed to glow before fading. The umbrella became a small world of light, a floating constellation, just big enough for two. I thought of everything I could have said apologies, questions, all the unfinished sentences that had haunted the edges of my sleep, but none of them felt necessary. The silence between us was not empty. It was full of the rain's slow forgiveness. You looked out toward the river and said, almost to yourself, "It's strange. When stars fall, people make wishes. But maybe the stars aren't falling at all. Maybe they're just coming closer to listen." The words settled in me like warmth. For the first time in so long, I felt completely still. The world had stopped spinning. Time had stopped demanding. There was only the sound of rain, the pulse of the river, and the quiet joy of being near what had once been lost. We didn't need to hold hands. We didn't need to explain where we'd been or how we arrived. Just standing there beneath that umbrella, our breath, clouding the same air, was enough dot above us. The sky shimmered faintly, its wounds closing, its tears turning back to stars dot, and somewhere deep inside, I realized the story I had been waiting to end had already ended long ago. Tonight was not a conclusion, it was a return. We stood there a little longer, two silhouettes under a canopy of light. The umbrella caught one last spark from the heavens and held it, trembling, before letting it fade. The rain eased. The night breathed. And in that small moment, everything that had ever been unsaid finally felt understood. The sound of the river wrapped around us like a lullaby. We stood side by side beneath the clear umbrella, our reflections trembling together in the shallow puddle at our feet. The air between us carried the scent of wet earth, the sweetness of the rain, and something softer, like the memory of forgiveness finally spoken. You tilted your head, watching how the fallen light danced across the water. "Do you ever think," you said quietly, "that maybe everything we thought was lost wasn't really gone? Just waiting for us to slow down enough to find it again?" I wanted to answer, but the words caught somewhere behind my ribs. I had spent years rehearsing what I might say if this moment ever came, how I'd explain the silence, the distance, the way life had pulled me in too many directions at once. But now that you were here, none of it seemed to matter. Regret, I realized, didn't need explanation. It only needed gentleness. The rain grew lighter still, the kind that feels more like mist than water. You closed the umbrella and set it aside, letting the soft drizzle fall freely onto our shoulders. Tiny drops clung to your hair and eyelashes, glinting like small fragments of light. You looked at me and smiled. "You used to hate the rain," you said. "I didn't hate it," I whispered. "I just didn't know how to listen." You laughed softly, and the sound melted into the night. You used to talk to the sky when you couldn't sleep, you added. You said it helped to imagine someone out there listening. I still do. You nodded, your eyes lifting toward the dim horizon. Maybe that's why I'm here. The simplicity of it undid me. My chest ached, not with sadness, but with a quiet relief, the kind that comes after years of carrying something too heavy. I wanted to tell you that I had missed you, not just your presence, but the way your silence could make the world feel less empty. But instead, I said, it's been a long time. You looked back at me, your expression soft as candlelight. Time's just the space we need to remember. The words settled into the air between us like dew. I thought of all the nights I'd spent alone, writing letters I never sent, hoping the rain would somehow carry them farther than my courage could. Maybe it had. Maybe this was the proof this night, this light, this quiet return. We began to walk again, the river to our right, the faint hum of the city far behind. The path glowed under the fading drizzle, each step a small reflection. You spoke about small things at first, the way the seasons had blurred together, the stray cat that used to visit your window, the sound of trains passing through the station at dawn. I listened, half smiling, letting your voice fill the spaces that had once felt hollow. And then we spoke about the heavier things, the missed chances, the words we hadn't said when they mattered most. There was no accusation in our tone, no bitterness left, just acknowledgement, just the gentle acceptance that some things had needed to happen the way they did for us. To understand this quiet now, you told me about the letter you never received, though you had often imagined what it might have said. I told you about the one I had written, how it had waited in a drawer all these years. You nodded as if you already knew. The rain must have kept it safe, you said. We reached a small wooden bridge where the river narrowed. The stars in the water were fewer now, their light dimming as dawn crept closer. We leaned against the railing, watching the ripples fade. The sky above had begun to pale at the edges, a soft gray-blue spreading through the clouds. I used to think regret was something that stayed, you murmured. But maybe it's just memory asking to be seen one last time. I turned to look at you, the faint morning light brushing your face. There was no sadness in your expression, only peace. The kind that comes when you stop needing answers. I think it's enough, I said quietly, just to be here, to remember without hurting. You nodded, and for a long moment, we stood without speaking, the mist curling gently around our hands, resting side by side on the railing. The rain had stopped completely now, though the air still shimmered, as if unwilling to let go. The first bird called from somewhere across the river. The sound was fragile, hopeful. You closed your eyes, breathing in the dawn. When you opened them again, your gaze lingered on the horizon. The stars are leaving, you said softly. They always do. Maybe they're not leaving, I whispered. Maybe they're just going home. You smiled, that quiet, knowing smile that had once undone me. And in that smile, every year between us seemed to vanish. The mist thinned, the light grew warmer, and for a heartbeat, I thought you shimmered like the rain light itself was passing through you. But I didn't reach out. Some things are meant to be held only in memory. I looked down at our reflections in the water. For a moment, there were two. Then one. The umbrella lay forgotten beside the bridge. The river carried its reflection onward, gentle and endless. Dawn crept gently into the world, painting the river in pale gold. The air was lighter now, carrying that quiet scent of morning after rain earth breathing again, washed clean. I lingered by the bridge long after you faded, unsure if I had been standing with a memory or a miracle. The water beneath me rippled softly, as though whispering not to question too much. I began to walk again, following the slow rhythm of the river. The bench where we had once sat appeared through the mist, a little crooked now, damp from the night, but still waiting. I brushed away the droplets and sat down. my fingers tracing the grain of the wood. It was smooth in some places, rough in others, like skin that had known both love and weather. The world was waking gently. A fisherman passed on the far bank, his boat rocking in soft circles. The hum of a bicycle bell echoed faintly in the distance. A child's laughter floated from somewhere unseen. And for the first time in a long while, these sounds didn't make me ache. They made me feel present. I looked at the sky. It was clearing fast, but the faintest shimmer of the fallen stars still lingered near the horizon, like the memory of a dream refusing to fade. From my pocket, I pulled out the small notebook I always carried, a habit from the years when I used to write things I never dared say aloud. The pages were damp at the edges, the ink slightly blurred. I turned to a clean sheet and began to write slowly, as if carving each word into the morning itself. Last night, the sky wept light instead of water. The stars fell, and the world forgot to be lonely. I met someone by the river, someone who reminded me that time doesn't erase what matters. It just teaches us to see it differently. I paused, watching the ink spread faintly through the page. A small beam of sunlight broke through the clouds and landed on the river, scattering ripples of gold. For a second, I thought I saw a figure on the opposite bank, a silhouette beneath a willow tree, umbrella in hand. But when I blinked, it was gone. Only light remained. Maybe that was enough. I leaned back on the bench, letting the sun touch my face. The warmth felt new, almost shy. In that moment, I realized how often I had mistaken solitude for emptiness. There was nothing empty about this silence. It was full of echoes, of rain, of small lives unfolding just beyond my notice. A small bird landed near my feet, hopping across the wet earth. It pecked at something invisible, then looked up at me, head tilted, curious and fearless. I smiled. "Good morning," I said softly. It chirped once, then took off, its wings catching the first true light of day. I opened my notebook again. We were both just travelers in the same storm, learning how to let go without losing what we loved. The rain carried us here. The stars showed us the way back. I think that's all love ever does. It leads us gently home, even if home isn't a place, but a feeling. I closed the book and set it beside me on the bench, next to a small folded napkin from my coat pocket. It was blank now, but somehow it felt like the right thing to leave behind, an offering for whatever or whoever had brought me here. Watched as a stray breeze caught the napkin and lifted it gently into the air. It floated for a few seconds before landing on the river's surface, drifting away like a tiny paper boat. I thought of us, our laughter years ago, the promises made under storms, the letter that never traveled but somehow still arrived. Maybe every word we send into the world finds its way eventually, carried by something unseen. Rain, wind, memory. I stayed there until the sunlight turned warm enough to dry the last drops from the bench. The world around me sparkled with newness, each blade of grass beaded with water, each stone glistening with quiet life. The sky was pale and endless now, the stars having gone back to where they belonged, but the feeling of them lingered. Before leaving, I placed my hand on the bench one last time. "Thank you," I whispered to the night, to the rain, to the version of you that had waited so patiently. As I turned to go, I noticed the faint reflection of the umbrella in a puddle near the path, clear, shimmering, resting there like a promise kept. The wind stirred, and the reflection rippled, stretching into light, and for the briefest moment, it looked like the stars were falling again, just for me. The sun had climbed a little higher by the time I reached the open stretch of the riverbank. The air still shimmered faintly, as if reluctant to let go of the night's strange magic. Every puddle reflected the morning light differently, some soft and golden, others tinged with pale blue. I stopped near one that had formed beneath an old willow, its surface smooth as glass. From my pocket, I pulled a small piece of folded paper, one I had torn from the back of my notebook before leaving the bench. The paper was blank except for a single word I had written earlier: wish. I crouched down by the puddle, my knees pressing into the damp grass. The ground was still cool from the rain, the scent of earth rising like something ancient and kind. With the tip of my pen, I added a few words beneath that first one. Not a sentence, just a feeling put into language. For peace, for gentleness, for every star that learned to fall softly. The ink bled slightly as the paper absorbed the moisture in the air. I smiled. It didn't need to be perfect. Somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of bells drifted again, carried on the wind. Morning bells, maybe from a church across the hill, or maybe echoes of something older, something that belonged to the rain itself. I folded the paper once, twice, then shaped it carefully into a tiny boat, the way we used to when we were children sitting by the river's edge. I pressed the creases slowly, deliberately, making sure each fold held intention. My hands trembled a little, but it wasn't sadness this time. It was the tenderness that comes with knowing you're doing something for the last time. I placed the paper boat gently on the surface of the puddle. For a moment, it floated still, catching the reflection of the willow leaves above. Then the wind shifted, and it began to move slowly, gracefully, toward the tiny stream that led back into the main river. I followed its path with my eyes, watching as it carried my wish away. It wobbled once when a raindrop fell from a branch, then steadied again, as though determined to continue. By the time it reached the river, the morning light had grown brighter, turning the water into a long mirror of gold. The little boat glided into it, small and certain, disappearing into the distance. I stood there a long time after it was gone. There was something profoundly beautiful about watching something leave and not feeling broken by it. It was like breathing out after holding your breath for years. When I turned around, I noticed a wooden crate half buried in grass nearby. It must have washed up from somewhere upstream. Inside were bits of paper, old receipts, torn pages from books, napkins with ink faded, nearly invisible. I picked one up carefully. It had words barely legible, written in what looked like pencil. I hope you're warm tonight. That was all it said. No name, no address, no date. Just a small, simple hope left for the world to find. I smiled and placed it back, arranging the other scraps neatly beside it. Maybe this was what the river did? Gathered wishes, carried them through time, delivered them in ways no one expected. The thought comforted me. Maybe the letter I had written all those years ago hadn't been lost. Maybe it had simply become part of this endless current of words and hopes, folded into every ripple, carried in every storm. I sat down again, letting my shoes sink slightly into the mud. The river shimmered before me, gentle and slow now. Birds skimmed the surface, their wings brushing the water like soft paint strokes. A dragonfly darted past, catching the sunlight in its glassy wings. Everything seemed to hum quietly with life. For a moment, I imagined you sitting beside me again, not as a ghost or a dream, but as something simpler, closer to memory's warmth. Maybe you were watching too, somewhere downriver, seeing that small paper boat drift past. Maybe, in your own way, you had sent one too. The thought made my chest ache, but softly, like nostalgia dressed in peace. I closed my eyes and whispered into the wind, let them all find their way. Every wish, every word. The willow leaves rustled above me, answering with a sound that could have been agreement, or simply the morning moving on. I didn't need to know which. When I opened my eyes again, the puddle beneath the tree was nearly dry, the sun drinking away the last trace of rain. I took one final look at the water, at the reflections fading back into sky, and I smiled. The stars had fallen, the rain had passed, but their light remained, quiet, patient, alive in everything that had learned how to let go. I stood, brushed the damp earth from my palms, and began walking toward the soft golden edge of morning. Behind me, the river carried its small boats of paper and light, each one drifting farther, quieter, freer. And somewhere in their journey, I knew, one of them would find its way home. By the time the sun rose fully, the world had forgotten the storm. The clouds had drawn back like curtains, leaving behind a wide expanse of pale blue, an air that smelled faintly of wet stone and new beginnings. The river moved slower now, its surface glassy, carrying only the smallest traces of last night's light. Reef flickers beneath the ripples, fading like gentle promises kept. I followed the bank until the path curved toward a grove of eucalyptus trees. Their leaves shimmered silver green, whispering in the morning breeze. The ground beneath them was damp and soft, scattered with fallen bark and the faint shimmer of dew. I stopped beneath the largest one, tilted my head back, and listened. For the first time in years, there was no weight pressing on my chest. Only quiet. A quiet so deep it almost hummed. I could hear the distant rhythm of the city waking, the murmur of footsteps on wet pavement, the laughter of a child being led to school. It all felt far away, but beautifully alive. I sat down on a flat stone by the roots of the eucalyptus and closed my eyes. The world had narrowed to a few sensations. The cool shade on my skin, the heartbeat in my ears, the echo of rain that seemed still to linger in the leaves. It was in that stillness that I began to understand. Silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of peace. I thought again of last night's letter, of you beneath the umbrella, of the way your voice had softened when you spoke of the stars. It no longer mattered if you were truly there, or only part of what I needed to see. What mattered was that, in that moment, I had listened, really listened, and something inside me had answered. Maybe healing isn't sudden. Maybe it comes slowly, like the way light finds its way through a forest canopy. One leaf, one breath, one small surrender at a time. I drew a slow breath, tasting the sweetness of eucalyptus in the air, and let my thoughts drift like the river. I remembered the things that used to keep me awake, the unspoken apologies, the weight of words never sent, the longing that clung even after the years had worn it down. They didn't feel heavy anymore. They just existed, softened by distance, part of the landscape of my own becoming in the quiet. I began to hear other sounds, subtle ones almost hidden. The soft rustle of wings, the crackle of drying bark, the heartbeat of the river, low and steady, like the pulse of something ancient beneath the earth. And within it all, there was a faint rhythm I recognized, the sound of rain remembered. It was as though the world itself was replaying the night in a softer key. The way a dream returns when you least expect it, not to haunt you, but to show you how far you've come. I lay back on the grass, watching the fragments of cloud drift lazily across the sky. The sunlight spilled through the leaves, scattering into small golden dots that danced across my hands. I moved my fingers through them, pretending to catch light the way I used to catch raindrops as a child. A few meters away, a small stream branched off from the river, its trickle delicate and bright. The water's voice was clearer here, almost like speech, a language without words. I imagined it whispering to every leaf it passed, "You are still here. You are still enough." And maybe that was all any of us needed to hear. For a long while, I stayed there, eyes half closed, the world breathing around me. Thoughts rose and fell like waves, but none lingered long enough to hurt. The letter, the rain, the stars, they had all done what they came to do. They had taught me how to stay. When the wind shifted, I smelled jasmine again, faint, distant, as though carried from some unseen garden upstream. It wrapped around me like memory's softest thread. I smiled, realizing it was the same scent that had filled the room when the first raindrop fell. The story had circled back on itself, quiet and whole. Somewhere, a single drop of water fell from the leaves above and landed near my ear. The sound was small, but it rippled through everything, through the soil, through my bones, through the space where grief had once lived. It sounded like completion. I whispered, half to the trees, half to the morning, "Thank you." No one answered, and yet everything did. The river murmured, the wind nodded, the sky widened, and in that vast, tender silence, I knew that the rain hadn't left. It had only changed form, resting now in the mist, the air, the heartbeat of the world. The stars, too, were still here, scattered in smaller ways, in the glint of water on a leaf, in the shimmer of light on stone, in the gentle pulse of being alive. I smiled again, eyes closed, and let the quiet cradle me dot the world. I realized was still whispering, not in thunder or sorrow, but in the softest rain that never truly stopped. By midday, the river was calm again, its surface smooth as silk, catching only the faintest tremor of wind. The fallen stars had vanished completely now, their light folded back into the sky, leaving behind only the quiet shimmer of memory. I walked slowly along the bank, barefoot this time, feeling the cool dampness of the grass beneath my feet. The earth was soft, forgiving. Every step pressed a small impression that filled instantly with glistening dew. Somewhere ahead, the scent of bread drifted through the air, warm, yeasty, comforting. I smiled at the thought of it. The bakery near the bridge must have opened its doors again. I remembered the promise from last night, warm bread at dawn, a walk past the bakery. It had sounded like a dream then, something said just to soothe the dark. And yet, here I was, the day gently keeping its word. I followed the smell until I saw it. A small shop with fogged windows, sunlight spilling through like honey. The bell above the door chimed softly as I entered. Inside, the air was thick with warmth and sweetness. Rows of loaves lined the counter, their crusts golden and crackling, while behind the glass lay pastries glazed with sugar and fruit. The woman behind the counter looked up, smiled the kind of smile only early morning people have. "You came in with the rain," she said, her voice kind. "I suppose I did," I replied. "Still falling?" "Not anymore," I said. "It stopped when the stars went home." She tilted her head slightly, maybe unsure if I was speaking poetry or truth. "Well," she said after a pause, "then it's a good morning to start again." I nodded. "It is." She wrapped a small loaf in paper and handed it to me. "On the house," she said. "You look like someone who needs to carry something warm." I thanked her and stepped outside, the loaf still steaming faintly in my hands. I tore off a small piece and ate it as I walked, the crust crisp, the inside soft, still alive with heat. It tasted like forgiveness, like the simple kindness of the world returning. The streets were drying. Sunlight pooled in the puddles, turning them to mirrors that reflected pieces of sky. I walked slowly, savoring every sight, the way the light touched the window panes, the soft hum of bicycles gliding by, the faint glisten of rain still clinging to leaves. Everything looked familiar, but somehow new, as though the storm had rewritten the colors of the day dot at the river's edge. I found a spot where the water bent toward the east. A small wooden pier jutted out, old and slightly uneven. I sat down, letting my feet dangle above the gentle current. The loaf rested beside me on the pier, the paper crinkling softly in the breeze. Across the water, I saw a reflection that made my heart pause, a shimmer, faint and fleeting, as if someone else were sitting opposite me on another invisible pier, a figure beneath a clear umbrella, though the sky was clear. I blinked, and it was gone, replaced by the glint of sunlight on the surface. But I didn't feel sad dots sometimes. I thought, Love returns not to stay, but to show us that we're no longer lost. I broke another piece of bread and let it fall into the river. The current caught it, carrying it gently downstream until it disappeared into light dot as I watched it drift away. I thought about all the promises we make to others, to ourselves, to the world. Some we keep, some we let go, but perhaps the ones that matter most are the ones that bring us here, to the quiet understanding that we have arrived, not perfectly, not completely, but peacefully. I leaned back, resting on my hands, and closed my eyes. The sun warmed my face, the breeze brushed against my skin, and somewhere nearby, a bird began to sing. The melody was simple, unhurried. I didn't know its name, but I recognized its feeling, that soft, wordless gratitude of being alive in this very moment. When I opened my eyes again, the sky was a deeper blue, no clouds, no rain, only light. The kind of light that felt like a promise kept. I whispered softly, "You were right." Small promises are the easiest to keep. The river shimmered as though it had heard. A faint ripple brushed the pier's edge, then stilled again. I stayed there for a while longer, watching the light move across the water, feeling the day unfold with a patience that felt sacred. Nothing demanded. Nothing rushed dot, and as the bread cooled beside me, as the sunlight reached the far side of the river, I knew that this small, ordinary morning was the continuation of last night's miracle. The stars had fallen. The rain had healed, and now the world was quietly teaching me how to stay. The afternoon unfolded softly, without urgency. The bakery's scent faded behind me, replaced by the quiet perfume of sun-warmed grass and river air. I followed the narrow path home, its stones still slick from the morning dew. The world was shimmering with life again, bees hovering near wildflowers, the faint hum of cicadas rising from the trees, the low sigh of the wind brushing against water dot. When I reached my doorway, I paused. The wooden frame still bore faint marks from the rain's small silver lines where droplets had dried in crooked trails. I ran my hand over them, the way one might trace a scar, and found it beautiful. Proof that the storm had passed, but not without leaving its story behind. Inside, the room smelled faintly of jasmine. The lamp still sat on the desk, its amber shade casting a soft glow even in daylight. The teacup from last night remained where I had left it, a small pool of cool water gathered inside from the open window. And there, beside it, was the letter. The paper had curled slightly at the edges, as though breathing. I picked it up and unfolded it again, the words familiar now, but different somehow. The ink had bled faintly from the night's humidity, softening each line until the letters looked like shadows of what they once were. I read it one last time, not to remember, but to release that each word carried less weight now, not because it mattered less, but because it had already done what it needed to do. The letter had led me to the river, to the rain, to you, whether in body or in memory, and that was enough. I placed it back on the desk, smoothed it gently, and smiled. The room was quiet, save for the occasional creak of wood and a faint rustle of curtains breathing with the wind. I realized then how alive the silence had become. It no longer felt like absence. It was full of small, unseen motion, the whisper of dust settling, the murmur of the house adjusting to warmth, the quiet pulse of being here now. I poured a fresh cup of tea, this time letting the jasmine steep longer until the water turned the color of honey. The steam curled upward, carrying with it the faintest shimmer of sunlight through the window. I sat, sipped, and let my mind drift. What the rain remembered, I thought, was everything we tried to forget. The small promises we made to ourselves, the tenderness we once felt, but buried beneath time. The rain never really left, just changed form, waiting for the right night to fall again. I looked around the room and noticed new light settling in places, It had never reached before the corner near the bookshelf. The framed photograph on the wall, the soft folds of the curtain. The light had found its way into every shadow, not by force, but by patience. Maybe that's how healing works too. Not all at once. Just one quiet corner at a time. I walked to the window and opened it wide. The afternoon air flowed in, warm and clean. The willow tree outside was dripping sunlight instead of water now, its branches alive with sparrows hopping and shaking droplets onto the earth. Below, the street was alive with ordinary life, again children skipping through puddles that refused to dry, a man humming as he carried groceries home, a stray dog finding shade beneath a bench. The world had resumed, unaware that it had been remade in the night. And yet, I could feel it. The shift. The soft rearranging of everything familiar. I returned to the desk and reached for the old photograph, the one from the train station, the 2 cups of tea captured in that single frozen morning. I held it up to the window light. For the first time, I noticed something small, almost hidden, a faint reflection of a person in the glassmate, perhaps, or maybe you. Just stepping out of frame. It didn't matter which. I placed the photograph beside the letter. 2 memories side by side, one unfinished, one complete. The past and present folded together like the sound of rain against glass. Outside, a breeze stirred, lifting the edge of the letter. I let it flutter, watched it rise for a heartbeat before falling still again. Maybe this is how stories end. I thought not with a closing line, but with a breath, with the soft understanding that nothing truly ends. It just returns in gentler forms. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the world beyond the window, the quiet dripping of leaves, the laughter of strangers, the sigh of the river somewhere in the distance. And in that sound, I heard it again, the same rhythm as last night's rain. Slow, tender, eternal dot was then I realized the rain had not fallen on us, but through us, washing away what no longer needed to stay, leaving behind only the truth that everything, even sorrow, could be softened by light. I took another sip of tea, its warmth spreading through me like sunlight through the window, and I whispered to no one and to everything, I remember. The air answered in its own way silent, golden, a live dot as the sun began its descent. The light shifted once more, from gold to amber, from amber to a dusky rose. Shadows stretched across the floor, long and soft, like brushstrokes painted by the slow hand of evening. The world outside the window glowed gently, as though still carrying traces of the stars that had fallen the night before. I left the desk and stood by the open window, feeling the day cool against my skin. The air was different now, quieter, lighter, carrying the smell of rain that had sunk deep into the soil. Somewhere in the distance, someone was playing a harmonica. The melody wandered through the air, sweet and imperfect, like something half-remembered from childhood. It struck me then how time folds in strange ways. The moments we think we've lost never really disappear. They linger, like faint echoes carried through the years. Maybe the rain had known this all along, that it wasn't here to erase, but to remind. I closed my eyes and listened. The melody drifted, rising and falling with the rhythm of the wind. In its soft refrain, I could almost hear your laughter, the way it once filled the pauses between thunderclaps. I could almost see the reflection of your umbrella beside mine on the glass. But the ache that followed wasn't sharp anymore. It was tender, the kind that lets you breathe deeper rather than break. I whispered quietly, "You made it back to the sky, didn't you?" The wind answered by lifting the curtains, brushing them gently across my hand. Not in reply, but in reassurance, I stepped outside onto the small balcony. The street below shimmered in the fading light. Pigeons cooed from the rooftop, and the hum of the city settled into its evening lull. The puddles that had once mirrored stars were now only small patches of twilight, but even they held beauty, each one a reminder of what had passed. The river glowed faintly in the distance, a thin silver ribbon winding through the heart of the town. I could almost imagine the paper boat I had sent that morning still drifting somewhere along its path, carrying my wish far beyond where my eyes could follow. I leaned against the railing and breathed in the quiet. A thought came to me, clear and simple. Maybe peace isn't something we find. Maybe it's something that finds us, who are finally still enough to listen. Inside, the room was bathed in a soft amber that deepened with every passing minute. The tea on the desk had cooled, the letter lay folded, and the photograph reflected the window's glow. Everything seemed exactly as it had been, yet entirely changed, as though the night had rearranged not the world, but how I saw it. I sat once more at the desk and picked up my pen. This time, I didn't need to write to anyone else. I wrote only for the night. The stars fell, and I thought the sky had lost something. But now I see they were never gone. They only came closer, so that the world could learn how to shine again. I paused, smiling to myself. The words felt light, effortless, like breath meeting the air. Outside, the horizon blushed pink, then lavender, then the soft blue of approaching dusk. A single bird crossed the sky, cutting through the colors like ink on silk. The moment held, suspended, timeless. When darkness began to gather, I turned on the lamp. Its golden glow filled the room once more, blending with the deepening blue outside. The light pooled across the floor, touching the letter, the cup, the photograph, each a small anchor to something real. And then, something unexpected, the faintest shimmer on the window pane. For a second, I thought it was reflection, but when I leaned closer, I saw a tiny streak of silver sliding down the glass. Another drop. Another star. It was raining again, not heavy, not even steady, just a few stray drops falling from a sky too full of memory to stay still. They caught the light as they fell, each one glowing before dissolving into the window's edge. I laughed softly under my breath, shaking my head. "So, you came back," I whispered. The sky didn't answer in thunder or wind. It simply kept falling, slowly, tenderly, as if reminding me that endings, too, can be gentle. I watched until the glass blurred with new constellations, each one flickering in the lamplight. The sound of the rain was the same as always, but tonight it carried something different. Not sadness, not longing, but gratitude. For the storm that had washed me clean. For the stars that had dared to fall. For the quiet that had stayed. I closed the window halfway, letting the scent of the rain drift in. The night was cool, soft, alive with possibility. And as I sat there, surrounded by everything the storm had left behind, the tea, the letter, the light, I realized I no longer needed to ask for more. The world had already given me everything it could. It had returned the stars. It had taught me how to see night return quietly. The way an old friend comes back, unannounced, gentle, carrying the comfort of familiarity. The city had dimmed to a soft hum. Lights flickered on one by one, like lanterns being lit in slow motion. Somewhere far away, thunder murmured, not as a threat, but as memory, the distant echo of a storm that had already done its work. Inside, the room glowed with the same golden warmth as the night before. The lamp's light shimmered across the window pane, catching the silver streaks left by the newest rain. Everything felt suspended, half in the world of waking, half in that soft, dreamlike place where thoughts become whispers. I sat once more by the window, a blanket over my shoulders, a fresh cup of tea between my hands. The steam rose lazily, curling toward the dim light like invisible handwriting. Outside, the rain continued its quiet song, not the wild symphony of last night's storm, but a gentle hum, the kind that holds you rather than breaks you. There was no need for words now. The story had already told itself, through stars and letters, silence and rain. All that remained was this: to listen, to breathe, to let the night finish what it had begun. Beyond the glass, I could see the river glimmer faintly, the faint reflection of streetlights drifting on its surface. The world seemed to move slower in this hour, as if time itself had curled up somewhere to rest. Even the air had softened. I thought of everything that had led here, of the first raindrop, the letter on the desk, the walk beneath the willow trees, the figure beneath the clear umbrella. All of it felt both distant and near, like dreams that linger on your skin after waking. Maybe that's all life is? A series of moments we gather, hold to the light, and then let fall gently, trusting they'll find their place in the river of memory. I took a sip of tea. It was slightly bitter, slightly sweet, perfect. The sound of rain deepened, a steady whisper on the roof. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I imagined I could hear the heartbeat of the earth beneath it, slow, patient, eternal. The rain was breathing with me now, or perhaps I was breathing with it. I opened my eyes again and looked at the sky. It was not dark, not yet. The horizon still glowed faintly, the last trace of twilight hanging like a sigh between day and night. Through the mist, I could almost see the shimmer of something faint, fleeting, like light rising, not falling. The stars were going home, one by one. They gathered themselves from the river, from the rooftops, from the silver edges of puddles and glass, and drifted upward, soft trails of white against the indigo sky. It was slow, almost invisible at first, but then undeniable. The light was returning to where it began. I leaned closer to the window, my breath fogging the glass. "Good night," I whispered. "Thank you." The rain paused, just for a heartbeat, as if listening. Then it fell again, softer than before. I stayed there until the stars disappeared completely, until the world had settled into its nighttime rhythm. The sound of rain became the pulse of the room, syncing with the quiet beating in my chest. I let my eyes drift half shut. The lamp's glow dimmed as I turned it low, and the room melted into shadow. Only the faint shimmer from outside remained, painting the walls with moving light. The air smelled of rain and jasmine, and something like peace. I lay down on the couch beside the window, pulling the blanket close. The cup of tea sat cooling on the desk, the letter resting beneath it. Outside, the rain whispered against the glass, tracing invisible patterns I no longer needed to understand. Somewhere in the distance, a single bell chimed. Once, twice, then silence. And in that silence, everything made sense. The falling, the meeting, the letting go. It was never about endings at all. It was about return, about light finding its way home, about hearts learning that even when they break, they do so only to make more room for tenderness. I closed my eyes, listening to the sound of the rain's breath against the window. It wasn't crying anymore. It was simply existing, like the sea, like the wind, like love after it has stopped needing to be named. The last thing I saw before sleep came was the faint reflection of the window light on the floor, a moving constellation made by water and lamp, shifting gently with each drop that fell. And just before I drifted away, I thought I heard a voice, soft, familiar, almost like yours, whispering through the rain, "Rest now. The stars are home." I smiled, the kind of smile that happens without trying. The rain kept falling, soft as breathing. And in its rhythm, I finally slept.